The pharmacy clerk lowered her voice when Caleb Rourke's debit card was declined for the second time, but kindness could not make the red letters on the screen disappear. Behind him, a man in a wool overcoat shifted impatiently, and somewhere near the greeting card aisle, a toddler began to cry. Caleb stared at the 2 boxes of insulin pump cartridges on the counter and felt the familiar pressure gather beneath his ribs. 1 box would last his 8-year-old daughter 12 days if nothing leaked, cracked, or failed. 2 boxes might carry her through the end of the month. "Run it again," he said, though he already knew there was only $19.43 in the account. The clerk did as he asked. The register chirped, "Declined." Caleb took 1 box from the counter and pushed the other back with 2 fingers. "Just this one." He paid with the emergency credit card he had promised himself he would never use again. The receipt curled from the machine like a white flag. By the time he stepped outside, freezing rain had glazed the streets of Cincinnati, coating parked cars and traffic lights in a skin of dull silver. He tucked the insulin supplies beneath his worn canvas coat and hurried toward his pickup. A rust-bitten 2004 Ford that had to be started with a screwdriver because the ignition cylinder had failed in November. On the passenger seat lay a pink envelope from the county housing court. Final notice was stamped across the front. He had until Friday to produce $3,800 in back rent and late fees or surrender the keys to the apartment where he and his daughter had lived since his wife died. Friday was 48 hours away. Caleb sat behind the wheel, listening to sleet tick against the windshield, and for one dangerous moment he imagined simply not going to work. He imagined driving south until the tank ran dry, carrying his daughter into some warm motel room and pretending that bills, court notices, medical suppliers, and winter did not exist. Then his phone lit up with a picture of Willa missing both front teeth, wearing a paper crown she had made at school. Beneath it was a message from their neighbor, Mrs. Duffy. "Sugar steady, homework done. She keeps asking when you'll be home." Caleb closed his eyes, pressed the phone to his forehead, and whispered, "I'm coming, Bug." Then he started the truck and drove downtown for another overnight shift. Mercer Dominion occupied 4 city blocks along the Ohio River, a fortress of blue glass, limestone, and polished steel built on the site of an old freight yard. The company owned rail terminals, bridge contractors, shipping depots, and enough warehouse space to cover a small town. Its founder and chief executive, Evelyn Mercer, appeared on magazine covers in severe dark suits beneath headlines about discipline, disruption, and American industry. Caleb knew almost nothing about her beyond what the maintenance crews said. She was 40, worth more than $3 billion, rarely smiled, and could silence a room by entering it. Caleb worked 6 floors below that world in the executive motor pool, where the company's armored SUVs and imported sedans slept beneath white lights. He had been an automotive technician before grief and medical debt hollowed out his life. Now he spent nights changing oil, replacing worn brake pads, cleaning salt from wheel wells, and making sure rich people never heard the noises ordinary drivers learned to ignore. At 1:47 that morning, he was inspecting a black Bentley assigned to the chairman's office when he noticed something beneath the rear bumper. At first he thought it was a folded shop rag. Then the overhead light caught a brass clasp. Caleb crouched and pulled out a woman's wallet, slim but unusually heavy, made from dark red leather with the initials E pressed into one corner. There was no one else in the garage. The nearest camera had been disabled for electrical repairs, and the security guard at the upper gate was watching basketball on his phone. Caleb turned the wallet over in his hand. The leather was warm, as though it had not been on the concrete long. He opened it only far enough to look for identification. Evelyn Mercer's face stared back from an Ohio driver's license, composed and unsmiling. Behind the license sat a black key card, 2 platinum credit cards, and a tightly wrapped stack of $100 bills. Caleb pulled the money halfway out, saw the bank band marked $50,000, and stopped breathing. $3,800 would save the apartment. $8,000 would clear Willa's pharmacy balance and replace the failing insulin pump whose alarm woke them twice a night. A few thousand more would repair the truck, fill the kitchen, pay Mrs. Duffy properly, and let Caleb sleep longer than 4 hours at a time. $50,000 was not luxury to him. It was oxygen. It was heat. It was a bedroom where his daughter would not hear him making collection calls through the wall. He looked toward the ramp. No footsteps, no engine noise, no camera. He could take the cash and leave the wallet beneath the car. A billionaire might not even notice the difference. His hand closed around the bundle. He thought of Willa sitting at the kitchen table while he measured out cereal because the milk had to last until payday. He thought of the night she had found him asleep in a chair with an eviction notice open on his chest and quietly covered him with her blanket. His thumb slid beneath the band. Something thin fell from behind the money and struck the concrete. It was a silver memory card sealed inside a plastic sleeve. A folded note followed it. Caleb picked up the note and read the typed words beneath the fluorescent lights. The federal inspector has agreed. Your signature completes the transfer. Miss the deadline and the child in the photograph loses more than a home. There was a picture clipped to the back. It showed a boy of about 10 climbing out of a school bus, unaware he was being watched. Caleb stared at the photograph until his fingers went numb. This was not lost money. It was leverage. Bribery. Maybe kidnapping. Whatever had been placed in Evelyn Mercer's wallet could ruin someone's life, and whoever had left it might return at any moment. Caleb slid everything back into place. For a few seconds, the ache of surrendering the cash was so sharp it felt like grief. Then he heard his late wife's voice as clearly as if Mara were standing beside him in the garage. A hard season does not give us permission to become someone else. She had said that during the first year of their marriage, when Caleb found an envelope of cash in a grocery cart and drove across town to return it. He had laughed then and told her she was too good for the world. Mara had answered, "No, the world is hard enough. That's why goodness has to be deliberate." Caleb fastened the brass clasp, tucked the wallet inside his coat, and finished his shift with $50,000 resting against his heart. At 7:30, after washing grease from his hands in a utility sink, Caleb rode the service elevator to the main lobby. The building had changed personalities with the sunrise. Overnight silence gave way to heels on stone, elevator bells, clipped conversations, and the scent of coffee, expensive enough to have its own biography. Caleb stood near the reception desk in steel-toed boots and a navy work shirt bearing a stitched patch that said, CEO Rourke. A security supervisor named Brent Talley looked him up and down as though Caleb had tracked oil across a church floor. Executive deliveries go through internal mail. It isn't a delivery, Caleb said. I found something belonging to Ms. Mercer. Then leave it with me. I need to put it in her hand. Brent's expression hardened. You don't decide who gets access to the chief executive. Caleb glanced at the wallet under his coat. He had not slept. His stomach was empty. He knew he looked like a man trying to force his way into a place that did not want him. There's information inside that could place someone in danger. Brent stepped around the desk. You can place the item on the counter, or you can leave the building. A woman's voice came from behind Caleb. What item? The lobby's movement seemed to hesitate. Evelyn Mercer crossed the marble floor with 2 attorneys, an assistant carrying 3 phones, and a gray-haired man Caleb recognized from framed corporate photographs as Grant Holloway, Mercer Dominion's chief financial officer. Evelyn wore a charcoal coat over a cream suit, her dark hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. She was not beautiful in a delicate way. She had the controlled, almost severe presence of a person who had spent years being challenged and had learned never to show uncertainty. Her eyes moved from Brent to Caleb. Well? Caleb took out the wallet. I found this beneath your car in the motor pool. Evelyn's composure slipped for less than a second. Grant Holloway's did not. He merely watched. She reached for the wallet. Did you open it? Enough to find your name. Did you examine the contents? I saw them. Her gaze sharpened. All of them? Yes, ma'am. The attorneys exchanged a look. Evelyn weighed the wallet in her palm and turned toward her assistant. Give Mr. Rourke $500 and have Human Resources record a commendation. Caleb felt something inside him stiffen. He needed $500 badly enough to feel his pulse in his teeth, but the offer landed like a hand brushing him aside. That isn't necessary. It is company policy to reward recovered property. Then change the policy. The lobby went very quiet. Caleb kept his tone level. I didn't bring it back because I wanted a reward. There's a picture of a child in there. Somebody is threatening him. You should call the police. Evelyn's expression became unreadable. Thank you, Mr. Rourke. I will handle it. Make sure you do. Brent inhaled sharply at Caleb's boldness. Grant Holloway's mouth curved into the faintest suggestion of amusement. Caleb turned away before pride could cost him his job. As he crossed the lobby, Evelyn said, Mr. Rourke. He looked back. She held the wallet at her side. Why didn't you take the cash? Caleb thought of Willa's insulin, the housing notice, and the cold apartment waiting across town. Because my daughter watches what I do, he said, even when she isn't there. Inside her private office, Evelyn locked the doors and opened the wallet on a glass table overlooking the river. She had not carried it in 3 days. It had vanished during a charity dinner at the art museum, and she had assumed a guest or waiter had stolen it. She did not normally carry cash, much less $50,000. When she unfolded the note and saw the photograph, her face lost color. The boy was Owen Pike, the 10-year-old son of a federal bridge inspector who had recently refused to certify one of Mercer Dominion's largest projects. The company was rebuilding the aging Greyhaven Bridge under a $900 million state and federal contract. 2 weeks earlier, Inspector Lucas Pike had halted concrete work after independent tests revealed substandard reinforcement steel. Grant Holloway had insisted the report was politically motivated. Evelyn had ordered a new review, but the board was already threatening delay penalties, lost financing, and a collapse in the company's stock price. Now someone had planted cash, stolen identification, a digital finto, and evidence of a threat in her personal wallet. If federal agents found it, they could portray her as the architect of a bribery scheme. If Lucas Pike's child was harmed, the damage would extend far beyond prison or money. Evelyn inserted the memory card into an isolated laptop. An encryption screen appeared with a warning. 2 failed entries would permanently erase the data. She removed it. Across the room, Grant Holloway stood near the fireplace, having entered at her request. He wore a navy suit, silver cufflinks, and the patient expression of a trusted advisor. A maintenance employee found it, he asked. In my parking bay. Then we have a serious internal security failure. We have a serious criminal conspiracy. Grant shook his head slowly, studying the photograph. Someone wants you frightened. Someone wants me indicted. It's me. We should call outside counsel before contacting law enforcement. Evelyn looked at him. Why? Because until we know what's on that card, you could be handing prosecutors a weapon. It was sensible advice. Grant had given her sensible advice for 11 years. He had stabilized the company after her father's death, negotiated with lenders, discouraged reckless expansion, and protected her through 2 hostile takeover attempts. Yet as he spoke, Evelyn remembered the maintenance worker's face when he refused the reward. Caleb Rourke had looked exhausted, angry and honest in a way the people around her rarely did. Find everything we have on him, she said. Employment history, debts, family, any connection to Lucas Pike. Grant's eyes narrowed. You think he planted it? I think anyone who touches this is at risk. Then let security manage him. I said find the file. Grant smiled without warmth. Of course. Caleb reached his apartment shortly after 9. The building was an old brick four-family on a narrow street in West Price Hill, with rusted gutters, drafty windows, and a furnace that clanged before producing heat. Mrs. Duffy opened the door across the hall wearing a blue housecoat and orthopedic shoes. Your girl ate half a banana and one of those eggs you made. Her numbers? 118 and steady. She thinks I don't know she hid the rest of the banana for you. Caleb smiled despite himself. Mrs. Duffy was 74, widowed, and too proud to admit that the money Caleb left on her table each week barely covered the groceries she bought for Willa. Thank you for keeping her. You thank me every morning. It's getting tiresome. She squeezed his arm. There was a man sitting in a gray car across the street around 6. He left when I looked at him. Caleb glanced through the stairwell window. The curb was empty. Probably waiting for someone. Maybe not. Inside the apartment, Willa sat on the floor in mismatched socks, building a suspension bridge from craft sticks. She had Mara's reddish-brown hair and Caleb's solemn gray eyes. A clear tube from the insulin pump disappeared beneath her sweatshirt. Daddy, Mrs. Kelly says bridges spread weight into triangles. Did you know triangles are stronger than squares? I know now. He knelt and opened his arms. Willa climbed into them with the careless trust of a child who had never doubted he would catch her. Caleb breathed in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. You're freezing, she said. Occupational hazard. What's that? Means your father needs better gloves. He placed the pharmacy bag on the counter where the housing notice lay beneath a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Willa saw the pink envelope. Is that from the apartment people? Caleb busied himself with the coffee maker. Just grown-up mail. Are we moving? The question was too direct for evasion. Caleb turned. Willa's hands were folded over her pump, a habit she had when anxious. I'm working on it. Mrs. Kelly says moving can be an adventure. Mrs. Kelly is right. But we're not moving because we're poor, are we? Caleb crossed the room and crouched beside her. Listen to me. We have less money than some people. That's true. But poor isn't the same as worthless, and it isn't the same as defeated. Willa studied him. Are you defeated? Not today. She nodded as if that settled the matter. Caleb kissed her forehead. His phone rang from an unknown number. He answered, expecting a creditor. No one spoke. He heard breathing, then a click. A minute later, a text arrived from another number. You should have kept what you found. The message vanished from the screen before he could capture it. At Mercer Dominion, Evelyn's assistant delivered Caleb's personnel file at 10:20. Evelyn read it alone. Caleb Rourke, 37, former master mechanic at a regional bus company. Widower. 1 dependent child. Garnished wages. Medical debt. Eviction proceedings. 3 disciplinary notes for arriving late, all tied to pediatric appointments. No criminal history. No political involvement. No known connection to Lucas Pike. Then she reached the spouse information. Mara Rourke, deceased, formerly Mara Ellison, internal controls analyst, Mercer Dominion. Evelyn sat straighter. She remembered the name not because she had known Mara personally, but because 2 years earlier a young analyst had submitted concerns about irregular payments routed through subcontractors on the first phase of the Grey Haven Bridge project. Grant Holloway had reviewed the matter and reported that the discrepancies were accounting errors caused by software migration. 5 days later, Mara died when her car went through a guardrail on River Road. Police blamed black ice and mechanical failure. The internal report disappeared beneath more urgent crises. Evelyn opened the archived compliance directory. Mara's original complaint was missing. So were the attachments, the audit trail, and the access logs. She called the Director of Information Security and learned he had been terminated 18 months earlier on Grant's recommendation. Evelyn felt a coldness move through her that had nothing to do with fear. She had built her reputation on control, yet someone had been committing crimes inside her company while using her certainty as camouflage. Her phone rang. It was Grant. "I've reviewed Rourke," he said. "Desperate, indebted, emotionally compromised. He is precisely the sort of employee a competitor might recruit. His wife worked here." A pause. "Did she?" "You investigated her complaint." "Evelyn, I investigate dozens of matters." "She died before you closed the file." Another pause, shorter this time. "Are you suggesting I caused a traffic accident?" "I'm suggesting I want the complete file on my desk." Grant sighed with theatrical disappointment. "You are under pressure. Do not let a janitorial employee and an old tragedy distort your judgment. He is a mechanic. He wears a maintenance badge. The distinction is emotional, not practical." Evelyn hung up. She contacted her private security director, Gideon Shaw, a former state investigator whose loyalty she trusted more than anyone's. "Find Caleb Rourke," she said. "Do not call company security. Take 2 people you chose yourself. Bring the wallet and meet me in the underground exit." Gideon heard something in her voice. "What happened?" "I think Grant Holloway has been deciding what I'm allowed to know." By late afternoon, sleet had turned to wet snow. Caleb had slept less than 2 hours when the building superintendent pounded on his door and announced that the landlord had accelerated the lockout. "Sheriff's coming tomorrow morning," he said without meeting Caleb's eyes. "Owner says you've had enough chances." Caleb closed the door gently because Willa was watching from the couch. He called the housing office, a legal aid line, the hospital financial counselor, and the mechanic who owed him $400 for weekend work. No one could help in time. At 4:12, his supervisor called and told him not to report for his shift. "Administrative review," the man said. Something about unauthorized access to executive property. Caleb understood. Someone wanted him isolated and afraid. He packed Willa's medication, 2 changes of clothes, Mara's framed photograph, and the wooden jewelry box containing their marriage certificate. He told Willa they were spending the night with Mrs. Duffy. The lie lasted until the hallway lights went out. A heavy vehicle stopped outside. Caleb moved to the window and saw a white utility van parked against the curb with no company markings. 2 men stepped out. Both wore work jackets and baseball caps. Neither carried tools. One looked up at Caleb's window. "Willa," Caleb said calmly, "put on your boots." She heard the change in his voice and obeyed without asking why. Caleb locked the deadbolt, slid a kitchen chair beneath the knob, and took the tire iron he kept beside the radiator. A knock sounded. "Gas company," a man called. "Emergency inspection. Show your badge through the window." Silence. Then the doorknob turned. Mrs. Duffy opened her door across the hall. "Nobody called about gas." One of the men shoved her backward. Caleb saw her fall, and something primitive rose inside him. He opened his door before they could break it, swung the tire iron into the first man's forearm, and drove his shoulder into the second. The hallway erupted in curses and splintering wood. Willa screamed. Caleb managed to push one man down the stairs, but the other struck him across the temple with a pistol. Light burst behind his eyes. He hit the wall and slid to one knee. The man raised the gun. A sharp crack sounded from below. The weapon flew from his hand. Gideon Shaw came up the stairs with a compact pistol leveled at his chest. Behind him, Evelyn Mercer stood in a long black coat, snow melting in her hair. "Move away from him," Gideon ordered. The attacker lunged instead. Gideon struck him once in the throat and forced him to the floor. The first man fled through the rear stairwell. Evelyn stepped over the broken chair and entered Caleb's apartment as though walking into danger were another board meeting she had scheduled herself. Her gaze found Willa immediately. The girl stood beside the couch, gripping her backpack straps. Evelyn lowered herself until they were eye level. "Willa, my name is Evelyn. Your father helped me this morning. Now I'm going to help him." Willa looked at Caleb. Blood ran from his temple into his eyebrow. "Is she your boss?" "Technically, and does that mean she can fire you?" Evelyn answered before Caleb could. "Not tonight." They left through the alley in 2 vehicles, with Gideon driving the first and another security officer following. Caleb sat in the back beside Willa, holding a clean cloth to his head. Evelyn rode opposite them, the red wallet in her lap. "Those men work for you?" Caleb asked. "Not for me. For someone who believes the company belongs to him." "Grant Holloway?" Evelyn's eyes flickered. "You know the name?" "My wife said it once, the week before she died. She told me there was a senior executive who could make numbers disappear. She was scared, but she wouldn't tell me more. She thought protecting me meant keeping me ignorant. She filed a compliance report about the Greyhaven Bridge contracts." Caleb went still. "You knew?" "I knew there had been a report. I was told it was resolved. And you accepted that." The accusation landed cleanly. Evelyn did not defend herself. "Yes." Snow streaked across the dark windows. "That was my failure." Caleb looked at Willa, who had fallen silent against his side. Mara's car had just been serviced. Brakes, steering, tires. The police said a tie rod failed and she lost control. "Who serviced it?" "A shop the company recommended. They closed 6 months later." Evelyn pressed her thumb against the wallet's brass clasp. "Grant oversaw the employee assistance program that made the recommendation." Caleb's hand tightened around the cloth. Grief, which had lived in him as a cold and familiar ache, changed shape. It became heat. "He killed her." "I believe he arranged it." "Belief isn't proof." "No." "Then why are we running?" "Because the card in this wallet may contain proof, and because Grant's men came to your home before I could reach you." Willa looked up. "Are bad people mad at Daddy because he gave something back?" Evelyn met her eyes. "Yes." "That doesn't make sense. Bad people often become angry when someone refuses to be like them." The girl considered this. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't expect." The vehicles turned away from downtown and climbed into the hills east of the city. Gideon drove through iron gates surrounding an old stone house above the river. Evelyn explained that it had belonged to her grandmother and was maintained by a trust unconnected to Mercer Dominion. Inside, the room smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Willa was given hot chocolate, soup, and a bedroom with blue wallpaper. Caleb resisted until exhaustion and blood loss weakened his anger, then allowed a retired nurse from Gideon's team to close the cut above his eye with 4 stitches. When Willa finally slept, Caleb found Evelyn in the library beside a fire, the encrypted memory card inserted into an isolated computer. 2 attempts, she said. That's all we have. Mara believed in phrases, not numbers. What kind of phrases? Caleb looked at the screen. She used to say a clean ledger is a promise. Evelyn typed clean ledge, rise a promise. The screen flashed red. 1 attempt remaining. Caleb's heart dropped. Wait. He closed his eyes. Mara at the kitchen table, explaining audits while Willa slept in a bassinet, her pencil tapping the margin. Truth survives arithmetic, she had said, laughing when Caleb accused her of making accounting sound biblical. Try. Truth survives the numbers. No spaces. Evelyn typed carefully. The screen held for 3 long seconds, then opened. The files were not merely financial records. They were a map of a criminal enterprise built beneath Mercer Dominion's legitimate business. Grant had created shell subcontractors that billed the company for steel, concrete, transport, safety inspections, and environmental work never performed. Money moved through banks in Delaware, Panama, and the Cayman Islands before returning to private trusts. The missing funds exceeded $180 million. More disturbing were scanned inspection reports showing that the Greyhaven Bridge's support cables had failed quality testing. Grant had buried the results, pressured engineers, and arranged payments to local officials. The $50,000 in Evelyn's wallet was intended for Lucas Pike, the federal inspector whose son appeared in the photograph. A forged letter on the memory card made it appear Evelyn had personally approved the bribe. There were audio files as well. In one, Grant told an unidentified man that the analyst from controls had to be discouraged before she reached the chief executive. In another, recorded weeks later, he complained that the River Road solution had attracted too much police attention. Caleb listened without moving. Mara's death was not described in detail, but it did not need to be. The voice, the timing, and the reference were enough to strip away the last shelter of uncertainty. He rose from the desk so abruptly, the chair struck the wall. "I'm going back." Evelyn blocked the door. "To do what?" "Find him." And then, Caleb's jaw worked. "Move." "No. He murdered my wife. I know." "You don't know." The words came out rougher than he intended. "You went back to a guarded house. I went back to an empty bed and a 6-year-old asking why her mother wasn't coming home. I spent 2 years thinking maybe I should have checked the car myself. Maybe I missed a sound. Maybe Mara called me and I didn't answer. I buried her believing it was an accident." Evelyn stood in the doorway without flinching. "You are right. I do not know what that feels like. But if you leave this house angry, Grant wins twice. Once for killing her and once for turning you into a man she would not recognize." Caleb stared at her. The fire cracked behind them. "Don't use my wife to control me. I'm not controlling you. I'm asking you to choose whether you want revenge for one night or justice that lasts." His fists slowly opened. Evelyn stepped aside, but he did not leave. After a long silence, he returned to the desk. "What do we need?" "A confession linking him directly to Mara's death and the threat against Lucas Pike's son." "He won't confess. Not if he feels safe." Evelyn looked at the files. "But men like Grant confuse control with safety. We will let him believe I'm cornered, frightened, and willing to negotiate." Caleb wiped both hands over his face. "And where do I fit?" "You are the one thing he misjudged. A mechanic? An honest man with nothing he can buy." The next morning, Evelyn contacted the regional office of the FBI through an attorney Gideon trusted. By noon, 2 agents arrived at the stone house. Special Agent Marisol Vega listened to the audio, reviewed the accounts, and warned them that moving too quickly could compromise the case. Grant controlled corporate security, portions of the legal department, and several public officials. If tipped off, he could destroy evidence or flee. Lucas Pike and his son were placed in protective custody. The FBI prepared warrants but needed a stronger link to the violent crimes. Evelyn proposed a meeting at Mercer Dominion's abandoned Riverside Freight Terminal, where Grant had once negotiated private deals before the property closed. She would tell him the memory card was damaged but recoverable, and that Caleb had retained a copy. Grant would be offered a choice: resign quietly and transfer his voting shares, or face federal exposure. Agent Vega disliked the risk. "A confession is not guaranteed." "His ego is," Evelyn said. Caleb spent the afternoon with Willa in the kitchen, helping her make grilled cheese while agents wired listening devices into his coat. She watched him with the serious attention children reserve for moments adults are trying to hide. "Are you going to see the bad man?" she asked. Caleb turned off the stove. "Yes. Will you fight him?" "I'm going to tell the truth and let the police do the fighting." Mom said fighting wasn't always hitting. His throat tightened. She was right. Willa touched the bandage above his eye. "Are we still losing the apartment?" "Probably." "Okay. Okay? This house has a lot of rooms." Caleb smiled faintly. "We don't live here." Willa glanced toward the hall where Evelyn was speaking with agents. "Maybe Ms. Mercer has extras." Caleb laughed for the first time in days, then pulled his daughter close. Evelyn appeared in the doorway and waited until Willa went upstairs. "You can step away," she told him. "No one would question it. Grant came to my home. That does not obligate you to walk into his. Mara walked into your company believing someone would listen. I owe her more than fear." Evelyn's face changed at the mention of Mara. "I owe her something too." "Then don't make this about saving your company. It stopped being about the company when I saw your daughter standing behind a broken door." Caleb studied her, searching for calculation. He found exhaustion instead. "What happens to Mercer Dominion if the bridge scandal becomes public?" "The stock will fall. Contracts will be frozen. People may lose jobs. And you?" "I may lose control." "Does that scare you?" Evelyn looked through the window at snow-covered trees. "More than I would like to admit. Will you tell the truth anyway?" She met his eyes. "Yes." Caleb nodded. "Then we go and—" The Riverside Freight Terminal had once been the beating heart of the city's river trade. Now its loading bays stood empty, its windows were cracked, and wind moved through the old warehouses with the low whistle of a distant train. At 8 that night, Evelyn entered the main office alone, carrying the red wallet and a silver case. Grant waited beside a conference table beneath a single hanging light. He had abandoned his usual polished calm. His tie was missing, and a small pistol rested near his right hand. "You have caused considerable disorder," he said. "You sent armed men to an employee's home. I sent professionals to recover stolen property. They threatened a child. Children are threatened every day by poverty, disease, and weak parents. Spare me the moral theater." Evelyn placed the silver case on the table. The memory card survived. Grant's eyes moved to the case. "Then give it to me." "First, you resign. You transfer your shares to an independent trust and provide a full accounting of every shell company." He smiled. "You still believe you are negotiating from strength. I believe federal agents will be interested in the Gray Haven records. Federal agents are interested in whatever evidence survives long enough to reach them." A side door opened. Caleb stepped into the light. He wore a dark work jacket and the same scarred boots he used in the motor pool. Grant's smile faded. "The mechanic. My name is Caleb Rourke. Your name is irrelevant. It mattered to my wife." Grant leaned back. "Your wife made an error common among small people. She mistook access to information for power." Caleb moved closer, feeling the listening device beneath his shirt. "She found the bad steel. She found your subcontractors. She knew the bridge could fail." "The bridge was never going to fail. Your own reports say otherwise. Reports can be rewritten, materials can be replaced, problems can be managed. Mara couldn't." Grant's eyes hardened. "Mara was warned to stop. By you? By people acting in the company's interest. You arranged the failure in her car." Grant glanced at Evelyn. "Is this why you brought him? To perform grief for an invisible jury?" Caleb fought the urge to look toward the hidden agents. "Tell me what happened." "You know what happened. She drove too fast on an icy road. The steering linkage had been cut." "Then your mechanic was negligent. I was her mechanic." The lie came easily because the truth underneath it was stronger. I inspected that car the day before she died. Grant's face changed, only slightly, but Caleb saw it. You are bluffing. The police retained the broken part. New testing found tool marks. They know the shop that replaced it. They know who paid the shop. Grant's fingers moved toward the pistol. Evelyn said, "The man you hired is cooperating." It was another bluff, but now Grant was listening to fear rather than reason. He told them everything, Caleb said. How you ordered him to make the failure look accidental. How you chose River Road because there were no cameras. Grant stood so quickly, the chair fell backward. That incompetent coward was paid to follow instructions, nothing more. The words hung in the room. Caleb's heart pounded, but his voice stayed quiet. What instructions? Grant realized the mistake. Rage took over. She should have accepted the severance agreement. I gave her an exit. I gave her more generosity than she deserved. Instead, she threatened to go to the state, to the press, to Evelyn. She risked hundreds of contracts and tens of thousands of jobs because she wanted to feel righteous. So you killed her. I protected the company. Evelyn's face became still. You protected yourself. Grant turned on her. I protected what your father built while you played visionary. You think your speeches made this company. I bribed unions, bought inspectors, buried lawsuits, and kept lenders from tearing it apart. You inherited a throne and mistook it for proof of virtue. And Lucas Pike's son? Caleb asked. Grant gave a dismissive shrug. A photograph persuades more efficiently than a bullet. The men at my apartment. You were supposed to take the money and disappear. I chose you because your debts made you predictable. Caleb stepped nearer. You chose wrong. Grant grabbed the pistol. The warehouse lights exploded on. FBI agents poured through 3 entrances as Agent Vega shouted for Grant to drop the weapon. He seized Evelyn by the arm and pulled her against him, pressing the barrel beneath her jaw. Caleb stopped 6 feet away. The room filled with red laser dots, shouted commands, and the metallic echo of boots on concrete. Grant backed toward a loading door. Lower your weapons or she dies. Evelyn's breathing remained controlled, but Caleb saw fear in her eyes. Grant was no longer a chief financial officer protecting a scheme. He was a cornered man watching his identity collapse. You won't get out, Caleb said. Be quiet. There are agents outside. I said be quiet. You killed Mara because she made you feel small. You threatened a boy. You sent men after my daughter. But none of it made you powerful. It only made everyone afraid to turn their back on you. Grant's grip tightened. Do you want to watch another woman die? Caleb felt the question strike the deepest wound in him. For 1 second, he was back at the hospital, standing beside Mara's covered body while snow melted from his coat. He remembered how powerless he had been, how he had begged a silence that could not answer. Then he saw Evelyn watching him, not as a billionaire or employer, but as another human being held inside the consequences of his grief. Caleb lowered his hands. No, he said. I don't. Grant smiled. Then move. Caleb stepped aside. Grant dragged Evelyn toward the loading door. But you should know something, Caleb continued. Mara was not brave because she thought she couldn't die. She was brave because she knew she could, and she still refused to let you decide who she was. Grant's attention shifted toward him. It lasted less than a second. Evelyn drove her heel down onto his foot and dropped her weight. The pistol swung away from her throat. Caleb lunged, struck Grant's wrist with both hands, and drove him into the table. The gun discharged into the ceiling. Agents tackled Grant before he could rise. He screamed about warrants, loyalty, and the company he claimed to have saved. No one answered. Handcuffs closed around his wrists. As agents led him away, he looked at Caleb with disbelief rather than hatred, as though honesty itself had violated some natural law. Caleb did not speak. He stood in the cold warehouse while the last echo of the gunshot faded into the rafters. Evelyn approached, rubbing the red mark on her neck. "You were supposed to stay back. You were supposed to come alone. I own the company. I am allowed one bad decision." Caleb looked toward the door where Grant had disappeared. "Mara finally has the truth." "Yes." The word broke slightly in Evelyn's voice. "She does." Caleb sat on the edge of the conference table and covered his face. The grief did not vanish. It became honest. For 2 years he had mourned an accident. Now he mourned a choice someone had made to erase a good woman. Evelyn sat beside him without touching him, without speaking, and without trying to make the moment smaller than it was. The arrests widened over the following weeks. Grant Holloway was charged with conspiracy, fraud, bribery, witness intimidation, kidnapping threats, and murder. 3 subcontractors, 2 corporate security managers, a testing laboratory executive, and a former mechanic were also indicted. The Greyhaven Bridge project was halted while independent engineers replaced compromised materials. Evelyn stood before cameras on the steps of the federal courthouse and admitted that Mercer Dominion's oversight had failed, that executives had ignored warnings, and that her own trust in one man had allowed corruption to grow. The company's shares fell by nearly 40%. Board members demanded her resignation. Several lenders withdrew. Commentators who had once praised her discipline called her naive, reckless, or complicit. Evelyn refused to hide behind attorneys. She released Mara Rourke's original findings, funded a permanent independent compliance office, and surrendered her voting control to a public benefit trust until the investigations concluded. Thousands of employees feared for their jobs, and Caleb understood that truth could wound innocent people while exposing guilty ones. He watched Evelyn meet warehouse crews, drivers, engineers, and clerks in person. She did not promise that nothing would change. She promised that no contract, stock price, or executive title would be protected by a lie. Some people shouted at her. Some walked away. Others stayed. Caleb and Willa spent 10 days at the Stone House before returning to the city. Their apartment had been emptied, but Mrs. Duffy had saved their photographs, Willa's bridge model, and Mara's jewelry box. Evelyn offered Caleb a hotel suite. He refused. She offered a company apartment. He refused that too. Finally, Gideon found a modest 2-bedroom duplex near Willa's school and arranged a standard lease with 6 months prepaid from a victim protection fund the FBI had authorized. Caleb accepted because it was not charity disguised as command. On their first night there, Willa slept on a mattress on the floor beneath a quilt Mrs. Duffy had given her. Caleb sat beside the window in a folding chair and listened to the furnace hum. The room was plain, the walls were bare, and everything they owned fit inside 12 boxes. Yet no one knew the address except people he trusted. At midnight, Willa appeared in the doorway holding her blanket. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She climbed into his lap. "I keep thinking the bad man will come back." "He won't." "How do you know?" Caleb looked at the dark street. "Because a lot of good people know the truth now. Were you scared?" "Very. But you went anyway. Being scared and being brave can happen at the same time." Willa rested her head against his chest. "Mom knew that." "Yes," Caleb whispered. "She did." Spring arrived slowly along the river. Grant remained in federal custody awaiting trial, and prosecutors offered no plea agreement that excluded the murder charge. Mara's name was added to the company's new ethics center, though Caleb insisted the memorial include every employee who had reported wrongdoing and been ignored. Mercer Dominion survived, smaller and bruised. The board removed 3 directors, and Evelyn retained her position by a narrow vote after employees and pension trustees supported her reforms. She no longer traveled with an entourage unless security required it. She began visiting the motor pool before dawn, where drivers and mechanics gave opinions executives rarely heard upstairs. One morning in April, Caleb was replacing a suspension arm on a delivery van when she appeared beside the lift wearing safety glasses over a navy suit. "You are difficult to locate," she said. "Try the place where I work." "That is what I did." He wiped his hands on a rag. Evelyn held out a folder. Caleb did not take it. "If that's a reward, save us both the argument." "It is not a reward." "A promotion?" "An offer." He opened the folder. Mercer Dominion was establishing an independent fleet safety and field compliance division with authority to stop vehicles, suspend contractors, and report directly to the External Oversight Board. Evelyn wanted Caleb to serve as deputy director. The salary was more than 4 times what he earned. The position included health insurance that covered Willa's pump, legal protection from retaliation, and a scholarship fund for families of hourly employees. Caleb read every page. "I don't have a college degree. You have 20 years of mechanical experience. I've never managed a division. You managed a household through grief, debt, and medical emergencies while working nights. I suspect our meetings will seem simple." Caleb closed the folder. "Why me?" Evelyn leaned against the workbench. "Because when no camera was watching, when no one would have blamed you for taking what you needed, you made the right decision. I have spent most of my career hiring impressive people. I am trying to hire trustworthy ones. Those are not always the same. I have noticed." He looked through the open garage door at the river, bright beneath the morning sun. "I have conditions." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Of course you do. No title that keeps me behind a desk. Safety reports go directly to the Oversight Board. No executive can bury them, including you. And the scholarship is named for mechanics, drivers, janitors, warehouse workers, and clerks, not donors." "Agreed." "You answered too fast." "I expected worse. There is one more thing. Mrs. Duffy gets a paid position running the family support office 3 days a week." Evelyn blinked. "Is she qualified? Ask her and see what happens." For the first time since Caleb had met her, Evelyn laughed without restraint. "I will have human resources contact Mrs. Duffy." In June, Caleb and Willa moved into a small house on a quiet street west of the city. It was not a mansion, and Evelyn did not buy it for them. Caleb used his new salary, a settlement from the company's victims fund, and life insurance benefits reopened after Mara's death was reclassified as homicide. The house had 2 bedrooms, a maple tree in the backyard, and a garage large enough for Caleb to rebuild an old motorcycle he had stored since Willa was born. Willa chose yellow curtains and painted one wall of her room pale blue. Her new insulin pump arrived the same week, along with enough supplies that Caleb no longer counted cartridges in the dark. On the day they unpacked the last box, Evelyn came carrying a paper bag from a neighborhood bakery instead of a folder. She stood awkwardly on the porch until Willa pulled her inside. Mrs. Duffy arrived later with a casserole and immediately criticized the kitchen cabinets. Gideon brought a toolbox. By sunset, the house was full of voices, open windows, and the smell of cinnamon bread. Caleb hung Mara's photograph above the fireplace. In it, she was laughing at something beyond the frame, one hand lifted as though waving them forward. Willa stood beside him. "Do you think Mom knows we found out?" Caleb rested his hand on her shoulder. "I don't know exactly what she can see." "But you think she knows?" "I think love leaves more behind than we understand." Willa nodded, satisfied. Outside, Evelyn sat alone on the back steps beneath the maple tree. Caleb joined her with 2 cups of coffee. "You left your own party," he said. "It is your party." Then you left mine. She accepted the cup. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, a lawn mower started. The board approved the worker safety charter, she said, unanimously. That must have hurt them. Several appeared physically ill. Caleb smiled. For a while, they watched Willa chase fireflies through the grass. Evelyn looked toward the kitchen window, where Mara's photograph could be seen above the fireplace. I have replayed the morning you brought back the wallet, she said. I offered you $500 to make you go away. I remember. I thought everyone had a price. Most people have pressure. That isn't the same thing. You had more pressure than anyone I knew. Caleb took a slow drink of coffee. I almost kept it. Evelyn turned to him. The money? I held it in my hand and planned what I would do with it. Rent, medicine, food. For a few seconds I told myself taking it would be justice. What stopped you? He watched Willa kneel beside a flicker of light in the grass, careful not to close her hand around it. I realized my daughter might never know where the money came from, but I would. Every good thing I bought with it would remind me of the man I had decided to become. Evelyn looked down at her coffee. I used to believe integrity was easy for people who had nothing important at stake. It is only integrity when something is at stake. A year later, the Greyhaven Bridge reopened after a complete structural review and replacement of the fraudulent materials. The city held a public ceremony on a clear October morning. Engineers, iron workers, drivers, state officials, and families gathered near the eastern span while river barges moved beneath them. A bronze plaque honored those whose courage had prevented disaster. Mara Rourke's name appeared first, followed by Lucas Pike and several laboratory employees who had eventually testified. Caleb stood at the edge of the crowd in a dark suit that still felt unfamiliar. Willa held his hand. She was 9 now, taller, stronger, and wearing the paper sunflower pin Mara had once kept on her desk. Evelyn approached the microphone but did not deliver the grand speech reporters expected. She spoke briefly about accountability, responsibility, and the cost of dismissing people because of their title, income, or place in an organization. Then she stepped aside and asked Caleb to unveil the plaque. He had refused 3 times before agreeing. As the cloth fell, cameras clicked and the crowd applauded. Caleb looked at Mara's name shining in the sun. He did not feel triumph. He felt sadness, gratitude, and a quiet settling inside himself, like a machine finally running true after years of strain. Willa leaned against him. Mom helped build the bridge, she whispered. In a way, you did too. Caleb shook his head. Your mom found the truth. You carried it. He looked down at her and smiled. Across the platform, Evelyn watched without trying to claim the moment. Grant Holloway had been convicted that summer and sentenced to life in federal prison. The headlines had called Caleb a hero, a whistleblower, and the $50,000 mechanic. He disliked all 3 labels. He had not set out to expose corruption or save a company. He had found a wallet beneath a car while trying to survive another night. He had been tired, frightened, and tempted. No choir had sung when he chose to return it. No certainty had assured him that honesty would repair his life. For several hours, doing the right thing had seemed to make everything worse. It cost him his job, endangered his daughter, and opened a wound he had barely learned to carry. Yet truth had also brought strangers to his defense, restored his wife's name, protected a child, and forced powerful people to listen to those they had trained themselves not to see. When the ceremony ended, reporters called for Caleb to face the cameras. He lifted Willa onto his shoulders instead and walked toward the river, leaving the questions behind. The bridge rose before them, steel and concrete catching the afternoon light. Cars moved safely across it, carrying people who would never know how close greed had come to putting their lives in danger. Willa rested her hands on his head. Daddy? Yeah, Bug? What would you do if you found another wallet with $50,000? Caleb glanced back at Evelyn, who was laughing with Mrs. Duffy near the plaque, then up at the road, stretching toward the far side of the river. "I'd hope it had an address inside," he said. Willa giggled. He carried her forward beneath the open sky, knowing at last that Mara had been right. Goodness was not innocence, weakness, or luck. It was a decision made in darkness, before anyone promised that the light would come. The most powerful lesson from Caleb's story is that integrity matters most when doing the right thing costs us something. Returning a wallet filled with $50,000 was not an easy decision for a father facing eviction, crushing medical bills, and the fear of failing his sick daughter. That money could have solved nearly every immediate problem in his life. Yet Caleb understood that every choice quietly shapes the person we become. His daughter might never have discovered the truth, but he would have carried it in his heart forever. By choosing honesty in a moment when no one was watching, Caleb protected more than his character. He uncovered corruption, restored his late wife's honor, saved innocent lives, and taught his daughter what real courage looks like. His journey reminds us that bravery does not mean feeling no fear, and goodness does not guarantee an easy road. Sometimes the right decision makes life harder before it makes anything better. But integrity creates a kind of strength that money, status, and power can never purchase. When darkness surrounds us, we may not know whether the light will ever come. Still, we must choose who we want to be. What would you have done if you were in Caleb's position? Share your honest thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories about courage, justice, and the choices that define our lives.